morning, everybody. This is Doug, and you're listening to What's the Hazard? It is Friday, November 11th, Veterans Day. And so I want to specifically thank, so many people to thank. Anyone who has served or continues to serve in our military, men and women, thank you so much for your service. I know this sounds a little bit cliche at this point, but I am incredibly grateful. I was drinking my coffee this morning, and I always try to have a moment of gratitude in the morning when I get up. And first thing that came to mind was everybody who has chosen to serve. I know there are people in my family who have served. My guest's family, we were just sharing that people in his family have served. There are so many people in the safety profession that have served. People that have been on this show that have served. My good friend Aaron Cerrone, who continues to serve. So happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. I hope you get a free breakfast. I know there are a lot of places where they are. And if you don't get a free breakfast, call me and I'll take you to breakfast. So maybe not today, but thank you very much. I want to introduce Mark Jones, my new friend, comrade, and true believer. We met probably a month ago at a MakUSafe Conference over in Des Moines, Iowa. And I love those kind of conferences. It was a relatively small, intimate conference, probably 100 people. Everybody there was either on board or was making their way to being on board for this safety journey. And Mark and I just started chatting, and I knew immediately that we were kindred spirits. It just clicked immediately. You started saying things that were like right in line what I've been learning about. So you agreed to come on this, and it's always kind of an interesting, journey, fiasco, whatever you want to call it. I mean, you and I are both probably from a generation that doesn't really take well to these kind of things, but thank you for joining us. You are currently with Plastipack, a company that I'm familiar with. I've done a little bit of work with Plastipack down in Kansas City, actually. And we bumped into each other, and you are in Plymouth, Michigan. You are in a corporate position, I believe, right, if you're not the corporate EHS manager.
Yep.
And you have a really impressive history. You've done some big jobs and big things. And so I am really looking forward to hearing your story and your evolution as a safety professional. I do want to say one thing. I met with a company yesterday and with an attorney, and the company had just suffered a fatality of one of their employees recently, and they were looking for guidance. And so we met yesterday, and the two owners of this company were obviously devastated. They were still in shock to some degree. They were scared. They were anxious. They were nervous. They were, just really saddened by the event. And it just reminds me why what we do is so important. And so all of you that are true believers in this safety and health thing, keep doing what you're doing. Keep up the good work. It is really critically important work. Keep learning. That's why we do these things. That's why I bring someone like Mark on to share his experience and wealth of knowledge with you. If you're not learning in this business, you are certainly regressing. So keep the faith, keep up the good work, and we appreciate what you're doing. So with that, I'm going to introduce Mark Jones. And Mark is coming. I love your backdrop, man. You are coming to us from Michigan, Plymouth.
Yeah, Michigan. Yeah, right up. Yeah, right. There we go. Yeah,
I'm in Omaha, Nebraska. It's colder.
Yeah, see, we always do it by the hand. Yeah, I'm right there. There we go. Yeah.
Is that where you're located?
Yeah, we are. Southeast Michigan.
Close to Ann Arbor? Is that pretty close to Ann Arbor?
Yeah, 15 minutes away. Absolutely.
Okay. As an Ohio State graduate, it pains me to say that you're my friend, but I'm a bigger man than that. So
that's okay, because I can give you clear directions from Ann Arbor to Columbus. It's east till you step in it and south till you smell it. So
right, exactly. Right. Yeah. Exactly. I love that. Well, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it. And I've really been looking forward to this because, as I said, we just clicked immediately when we started chatting. And once I started learning about your history, I was just fascinated, and I would love to hear more about it. So this is where I shut up, and I'm going to turn it over to you and just, talk a little bit about your background and how you got into this crazy journey and where it's led you. And then we can talk about where we are today.
Yeah, and we'll talk some about hop too, and I got some pretty good hop stories, and I love to talk about my journey there. So I want to first start off, much like you said, about thanking veterans. My mother was a Navy wave. She's 93 years old and, doing well. And my father was in the Army, and he earned 2 Bronze Stars over in the Korean conflict. So military history is in my family. So again, I thank those veterans, and some gave all and all gave some. I'm sorry, some gave all gave some, right? Or some gave all, right? So what they've done for us is just incredible. I'm truly appreciative. So when I went to school, I wanted to be a firefighter paramedic, right? That was my career aspirations, and loving EMS and loving the fire service and the adrenaline and helping people and all that sorts of stuff. And while I was in school, somebody said, "Hey, what if you got like a health and safety degree too?" I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." So I decided, I was getting out of school at a time when there wasn't, a lot of jobs. So I decided it was the right thing to do, maybe pick up that dual major. When I got out of school, there were no municipal jobs. It was in the early 80s, and times were tough. It was a big recession. And resume number 122 clicked at an insurance company in the town that I actually lived in. I'm like, really? Work there? So I did insurance for 5 years. I mean, I was in loss prevention, and I really got to say that I really enjoyed that. And that, I think for those that are, entering into the profession, if that's an option that, they would want to consider. For 5 years, every single day, I was in a different plant, a different business, just doing something unique, talking to so many different types of leaders, and really learning the business. My favorite story, just quickly, is I go to a lot of businesses. I went to a combination funeral home gas station, right. which brings new meaning to the term drive-through, right? It wasn't a drive-through funeral home, but it was really unique stuff. And the reason I left that is not why you would think. It wasn't for the money, even though I was able to get more money before I left. Is instead of telling people how to run their own program, I wanted to run a safety program, right? Because every day I was telling people how to do it, yet I had never had that pleasure to do it. It's a pleasure, right? So I was blessed and honored. I went to work for Ford Motor Company. One of my fellow volunteer firefighters was like a divisional guy, and he was able to get me the gig to get in there. I had a fantastic a journey through Ford. I was there 31 years, same as Baskin-Robbins flavors. And I did 11 different positions. I actually retired as the corporate safety manager. And I'll tell you about some of the things there and some of the things I've learned. While I was there, we unfortunately had, the Rouge explosion, February 1st, 1999 at 1:03 p.m. That's in my mind. And I'll tell you some of the journeys that, we learned from that about SIF and why I really have a passion for SIF. And I love talking about it all day, because I think it's a bit of a lost art. And I really worry about the next generation. The things that you and I worry about to prevent minor injuries are not the same things as those precursors. We need to be learning about SIF events. And that's why learning teams and organizational learning and getting deep in the context and asking the right questions, that's how you get to SIF prevention. It's not, and I'll tell you, I'll tell you more about the company that I work for now. So I was actually retired 19 days. I went out and bought this very expensive, beautiful pontoon boat that cost a lot of money. And I decided, why don't I go back to work to get it, paid for? I had several job opportunities, but I interviewed with a company called Plastipack. I met the COO, and I fell in love with the guy. I still work directly for him. Not many safety people can say they work directly for a COO, but that's the kind of passion this company has. A privately held company, been in business 55 years. Our owner still comes to work every day. I saw him several minutes ago in the restroom. He asked me, "Mark, how are you doing today? How are things in safety?" But I asked my boss a story. I said, "I feel a certain passion for safety." I said, "What's your safety story?" He said, "Nobody's ever asked me my safety story." And I said, "I just did." Mm-hmm. And he told me a story about how he was preoccupied and how he got hit by a lift truck, and it just bruised his leg, and it could have killed him, and how it changed his whole outlook on life.
Wow.
So, and we'll talk more about that. Plastipack's the company that makes plastic bottles. The average person has 17 of their containers. Get 17 of our containers within your home. We make everything from, carbonated water bottles, detergent bottles, oil bottles, salad dressing, barbecue sauce. So it's very different than the auto industry, right? But it's a good, and again, just I'm excited to talk about some of the things I've learned to that, journey along the way. So,
remarkable.
Yeah.
So how long have you been with Plastipack?
I've been there 4 years. Last week was my 4th anniversary. Yep.
Nice,
And
nice.
in fact, on my 1 year anniversary was the most serious event in the company history, right? Where we had an employee, again, just a great human error story, that they were rewiring a piece of equipment. And they were basically putting something that was 110 into 480, and the employee didn't know, and completed the circuit. He went into cardiac arrest, and as all those things would have lined up, the nurse's station was literally 100 feet away. They put him on an AED. They shocked him, and by the time he got in the ambulance, he was talking to them. He literally had a 6% survival rate if you look at the statistics from the American Heart Association. And he was off 3 weeks and came back to work.
Oh my gosh.
So again, on top of everything else we do, the whole issue with emergency preparedness. Again, I've been in the fire service for about 40 years. The same with EMS. I was a paramedic 9 years, and just have, and all else goes wrong. Emergency preparedness is one of those things you don't know when you're going to need it, but having that in place is critically important. And we owe it to our associates. When I was at Ford, we probably averaged about 5 saves a year from our emergency response teams, and we took it really, really serious and kept, the CPR, first aid, AED updated, because it's just so critically important.
It is. Wow, that's really an interesting. I'm impressed that you were able to save that young man. Good for you. That reinforces what you just said, that our ability to respond to those incidents, while we want to be able to prevent them, certainly, but when they do occur, we want to be able to respond to them. I had a young man on the show last week who's a paramedic with the Omaha Fire Department, and he was talking about that, stopping the bleed, talking about these traumatic bleeding events and how to address those, and the criticality of doing that in a timely fashion. And like you, I have really committed myself recently to the prevention of catastrophic issues. We deal with OSHA compliance all the time. That's part of this. We have to be compliant, and that's important. And we also deal with the minor incidents that hit our 300 logs, and that's important. We don't want people to strain backs, and we don't want lacerations or things like that. We want to be cautious about those. But as you mentioned, those precursors that can lead to these critical incidents, I'm trying to heighten my game with regard to, intervention into those things and preparation in the event that something like that happens. This let's do a half-ass fire drill once a year thing and call it, preparedness just isn't cutting it. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really proud about. So one of the positions I had at Ford was I did a job where I was co-located with the United Auto Workers. I had a really fancy title called Company Co-Chair of the National Joint Committee on Health and Safety. So for every hour that an hourly employee works, 5 cents goes into a health and safety training fund, and our job was to administer that, right, and put together those programs. So I had a really terrific team of not just company, but union professionals we worked with really, really closely. Behind the scenes, we had some interesting discussions, but when we walked out the door, we were always shoulder to shoulder. But Ford at that time was, I'll say, a 103-year-old company, had never been a year without an occupational fatality. And we just put our feet in the sand, and we said, we have got to end this. And we put together a number of intervention programs relative to high-risk work. We went through everything that we do, from electrical to working at heights to all those different types of programs, and then did a lot with the non-routine pre-task type stuff, put together different processes, and had a whole methodology to think through that. And we had a streak of 6 years without a fatality. And again, I wish it had gone even longer, right? Again, and it was a fluke. But really what precipitated that was that, in addition to have never gone a year, is that although our skilled trades workforce was only 20%, they were 80% of those fatalities. So we really concentrated on working with those. We did focus groups and getting those folks together and really learning from them, really learning sort of the blue line of the work that's happening. And the thing that was so valuable to that is the folks that I worked with on the union side, they came from the floor, right? I'm a company guy. I'd never worked a damn day on the line, much like they had. And they had all come from the floor. And we go to a site and we would do learning teams. We would ask those tough questions and asking the better questions, right? Tell us the things that are the constraints. What are the issues? What job makes you nervous to do? because they're target rich. We just have to ask the right questions, and again, and put together the programs around it. And been with a similar journey here at Plastipac. When I came in the company, we were averaging about a serious injury, once a month. Again, never fatality, but some of the life-threatening injuries. It really saw a lot of those were relative to machine guarding and a lockout, and really put together strong intervention programs around those. And really proud to say that we've dropped those about 70%. And whereas averaging one a month, we had 4 the last 2 years, two the year before that. Again, that's the kind of stuff you take to zero. That's the kind of stuff you take to zero, right?
Wow.
And building capacity to fail safely and those type things. And again, we're going to talk more about it because I have like the best capacity story ever, and we'll get to that in a couple minutes.
But oh my God, there's so much there to unpack what you just described, and I am really in awe of the stuff that you've done. I am always, just totally respectful of people that have had big jobs and big responsibilities. I barely have any responsibility, and I can barely, shoulder the burden of my minimal responsibilities. But the things that you've done are very impressive. But one thing that you talked about that I would ask you maybe to elaborate on a little bit was the idea of a learning team and asking the right questions, and it relates to SIFs that you mentioned earlier. I think a lot of people ask me, how do we do this? I mean, they can read these books. You and I have talked about some of the books by Conklin and Decker and some of those guys, and they can read the books. I mean, that's okay. They don't always give great examples in the books. Sometimes it's a little bit more theoretical. Sometimes it makes it challenging. How do I really put this into practice? And I think the learning team concept, and asking the right questions is a great place to start, or at least one of the early interventions. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, I'm happy. If it's okay with you, I'll start on my journey a little bit and then jump into that. Is that okay?
Wherever you want to start. Absolutely.
Yep. So I actually look back because I wasn't quite sure what year it was. It was 2015. It was at ASSP, now ASSE, or vice versa. I'm sorry, ASSP conference. And I dragged my union and some of my company colleagues, and I said, we're going to Dallas. We're going to take a class on a Saturday, right? You're like, you're doing what to us? I said, we're taking a class on a Saturday. And it was my first time to meet Bob Edwards, who coincidentally, I'm spending my afternoon with Bob today. I listened to what Bob said, and just I got on board. It really, it sounded really interesting to me. Here's the thing I'm going to say: we were able to bring in Todd Conklin, and here's what I say to people: I've been blessed and honored, and I mean it, blessed and honored to probably have seen Todd 10 times, and to meet Sydney twice, and sit through half-day sessions with Sydney, and probably 4-hour sessions with Todd. It took me 3 times to grasp the concepts to where I was starting to say, I get it. So many folks say, in fact, I have to laugh. We're bringing in Bob today because we're having a big site managers meeting next week. And we prepped them with questions, and exactly what you said, exactly what you just said, Doug. They said, how do I operationalize this? What do I do with this? What are the kind of learnings that I can do from this? So what we started to do was, again, we were very fortunate that we had resources, and we were able to go out and actually try some learning teams. And we went to some of those high risk tasks, and the one that really comes to mind that I'll tell you was we went to a stamping plant that was doing crane maintenance. Okay, mm-hmm. So how high this crane is in the air, 30, 40 feet, it doesn't matter. It's one big step, right?
Right.
And while we were up there, you could see footprints on top of the crane in areas where they had to access the motors, and there was no fall protection.
Right.
And I'm not going to ask that foolish question because we both know the answer as to what was going on, right? Mm-hmm. And to sit down with those trades guys and just let them talk about their day and what the expectations are and the things that we ask of them, and ask them how they access us and what they do and what are the constraints and what are the issues. You talk about being, target rich. It was incredible. And then we were seeing a series of material handling injuries, where People were going in, to trailers. We had some people get pinned in trailers. We had a lot of stock issues, stock in the aisle, all these issues that were going on. We call them primary and secondary hits. So primary hit is where you get hit directly with the forklift or the rack. The second is they're moving stock, as their stock positioning, they bump that into you. And people said, well, we have to fix those. And I said, wait, a primary hit is different than a secondary hit. And the interventions are very, very different. A primary hit is probably a potentially fatal event, right?
Mm-hmm.
A secondary hit is there a bump or bruise. And back to like you and I chatted, what you do to prevent a minor injury is different than an SIF, and you have to separate those.
Absolutely.
So I was very fortunate. I think I sat through 11 different learning teams and listened to those forklift drivers who we always want to blame the forklift driver, right? And they come in and say, hey, I came in that day, the line was not replenished. So I was asked by my boss to get the line running, keep it going. And oh, by the way, somebody forgot to stock some parts. So I have to drop everything. I have to go to the other side of the plant, go onto a trailer, try to find it. Yeah, the reason I'm storing stock all over and blocking aisles is because I'm trying to get to that part to keep the line running. So these are not bad people that are trying to do bad things. These are people that fundamentally come to work to do good work, right?
No doubt.
And if you have a bad employee, that's a different story. Get rid of those people, right? But, understanding the blue line of what they face every day was, very, very interesting to us.
Absolutely. And that lends itself directly to the comment that Conklin made in that 5 principles, context drives behavior. I mean, as you said, these are employees that are trying to get the job done. They want to get the job done. They take pride in getting the job done. I mean, at least 90% of the employees that I deal with are on board trying to do a good job. There's always a few outliers, and those really aren't the ones we tend to worry about or deal with. It's these people that we are oftentimes contextually putting into difficult circumstances that we need to try to come to their aid and make some changes. But it's fascinating that when you open up to them now, were you able to get them to open up immediately, or how do you develop the trust that they feel comfortable sharing this stuff with you?
So again, you and I are aligned. I wrote myself a big note here and I put the word trust, right?
Yep.
And it's really beneficial. So I think the couple things. First of all, we were using an outside facilitator. Does that make a difference? I don't know. But clearly somebody that said, hey, I'm not here. I'm not a snitch for the company, et cetera. The other piece that at least I had going initially with those is that I was with a UAW member who was one of them, right? Mm-hmm. Who said, look, guys and gals, this is safe space. We're here because we care about you. And that's the reason we're here. And we want to get this data. And the people were a lot opening. I mean, initially, sometimes, Doug, like you can mention, it could be about like going to that, middle school dance with the boys and girls lined up on,
right.
on the different sides of the aisle. But to break down those questions and really start asking the leading questions, the open questions, more of the hows, you got to get away from the whys and just to get the dialogue going, much like it's really understanding the dialogue of what they do every day. Because let's face it, they're normally successful. Yes. And what's a successful day look for you? And then what are those operational challenges?
Right.
And what are the risks you think you face? So it's about the questions. I mean, we spent a lot of time asking better questions. And we've put here in my present role at Plastipac, one of our 2023 objectives is you can't tell people you just have to ask better questions. You got to teach people how to do it, right? Mm-hmm. So we actually put together guidelines of here's the kind of questions you ask to try to get that dialogue going about the, blue line. And one of the things that just my personal example, having spent 40 something years within the, volunteer fire service, is that the job I fear the most is using a K12 or a partner saw. It's a big, large reciprocating saw with a big blade that like you can cut the, you can cut into the side of a building. Those things scare the hell out of me. Right. Mm-hmm. And it has an incredible kickback to it. That's the job that I like to do the least. And that's the job that, if I'm talking to the fire service, just because I've done those jobs, I know that, but you don't always know that. The thing that I was able to do here at my job at Plastipac, which was really cool, is we have a plant that's 6 miles away, and they get really busy during the cider season making cider bottles. Mm-hmm. And they said, hey, does anybody want to come work the line? I raised my hand, right? So it was a rather interesting. So here I am. I mean, I probably I tried to wear the blue jeans and the t-shirt, right? But so here I am. It's in the middle of COVID, right? So I'm wearing all my PPE. I have to wear safety glasses. I have to wear a mask, and my mask is fogging up. I'm getting frustrated, and I think they first thought I was the company snitch.
Right.
So I have somebody come over. I have somebody come over and tap my shoulder. Sir, I need to do a team lift. Can you help me? I'm like, okay, that one was set up, right? But I went back a couple times, and Doug, I'm following the black line, right? Because I'm nervous. I know that I'm a bit on the spotlight. I've never worked a production line. This was pretty simple, really. I was taking bags. I was bagging them. I had to put a barcode on them. So I'm doing everything the right sequence. I'm trying to make the barcode work. Blue line. You got to listen for it. That wasn't easy. After they got more comfortable with me being there, my coworkers, saying, "Why do you do it that way? Do you know that you can scan 5 or 6 ahead so you can get a bit more break time?" And they were teaching me the shortcuts to the job. Absolutely. And then as the company was realizing that I was proficient, I could not run just one machine. I could run 2 machines. We're have somebody off today. Now I'm running 2 machines. So they're increasing the complexity of my job.
Yes.
And it wasn't sort of like Lucy, right? Building the chocolates, but it almost got me that it was stressful as hell.
Absolutely.
I had so much respect for those people that come to work to do that every day, in realizing they were all creatures of habit or creatures of efficiency. And I realized why the guy pre-scans 5 or 6 labels, but then what happens if the line goes down and there's a defect and I've already scanned those and I worked ahead? It scared me. I'm like, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not doing it anymore because I want to do what's right, and I wanted to help the plant, and it was a great experience. But I thought I got to follow the rules. I'm an old guy. I'm a rule follower. This doesn't make sense to me. Yeah,
that's exactly me. I'm a rule follower as well, man. I've always been called that, and I can't help myself. That's how I was raised. But what you were just describing, now I've been reading this other book that I think Eric Holnagel, the efficiency thoroughness trade-off. And what you've just described is exactly what he says in the opening of the prologue of that book, is that, when there is a demand for output, thoroughness takes a back seat to efficiency. We're going to find a way to make that happen. And if I have to cut some corners or develop some shortcuts, I'm going to do that. And if the emphasis is on thoroughness, then efficiency is going to probably suffer as a consequence in some respects. And these are just human nature issues that we deal with every day that don't fit neatly into a box necessarily. And I think, I know that Todd Conklin told me that, one of the biggest problems is that we just assume the work is going to be the same every day. And we design systems and procedures based on that false assumption that everything is going to be the same every day. It's really amazing. Now, I've never heard Todd Conklin speak other than on YouTube. And I've never met Bob, although I've listened to him on YouTube. And I think that's fantastic that you've had an opportunity to work with those cats. And
yeah, and now I'm feeling bad because you and I should have done this next week. I actually talked to Bob last night. We talked for about 15 minutes, getting ready for today. And he's actually taking the exact things that you mentioned about Holnagel, and he's actually put those into a hop context, and he's so excited about it. And he's actually presenting it today at 2 p.m. So
nice.
So I've never seen it, but he is bouncing off the walls, showing me that the work they're doing to incorporate that he and Andrea Baker have worked together. So more to come, and there's some stuff, and I'll be happy to share it with you. So those guys are open checkbook on the stuff that they do. So there's more coming on that. So
well, you be sure to tell them, and when you talk to Todd and when you talk to Sydney, because I know you're on a first name basis with these guys.
Not so much, but I hear you.
When you talk to these guys, you tell them that some of us out in the field really appreciate the information and the help, and we're trying to get on board. SIFs. I'd like to come back to SIFs a little bit. Could you explain, for those people that aren't quite as familiar with what you're talking about, what that means and how you distinguish when you are looking at near misses or other predicates, what a potential SIF event is versus some of the other less consequential events.
No, I'm happy to do that. And again, what really got me in this arena was the Rouge event, where we unfortunately lost 6 workers that day. And a number of things stand out for me that day. Again, never again. We just can't let that happen. And Ford made that commitment, and they did some wonderful things after that. But Bill Ford went on TV that day. He went right down to the site, and he got in front of the TV cameras. And you had all those handlers, as I call them, said, "Bill, don't do it." And he said, "Those workers are Ford family members." And he went on TV, right? And just the leadership, Bill Ford getting on TV and said, and talking to the media about, how the family and what that meant. So SIF, serious injury and fatality prevention. Some of the folks that have done a lot of work in this regard that I've looked up to over time was first of all Steve Newell from ORC. Steve has just been an incredible champion. ORC, as I understand, was recently acquired by the National Safety Council, and I think Steve is retired. But Steve partnered with the Alcoa Institute, and they had at least 2 forums in the country that I'm at least aware of. I was able to go to the second one, which was in Pittsburgh, which was specifically related to SIF, precursors, etc. This is just me personally. When I go to national conferences, I hone in on big oil, oil and gas. The reason is that those folks deal with high risk work every single day.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the processes, the procedures, and the work that they've done to address that, I find very, very educational. And I've really extracted and gleaned a lot from, listening to those folks. And much like we said, the things that you worry about, the minor injuries are very different from those SIF and those precursors. And the things that we can learn from those. The mindset is that if you're just chasing recordable injuries, you really got to be looking at potential, not necessarily outcome. Because the potential of those that, maybe we got lucky and the person failed safely, but if we haven't failed safely, and like I like to tell people, what does wearing fall protection do for you? You failed, right? You fell, but right. You failed safely, right? And what else can we do to build, capacity around that? And if it's okay, can I jump into my capacity story? Because I'm just trying to tell it to you.
Oh yeah, man. There's no rules here.
Yeah. So this is, I think, like the classic capacity story, and I can't make this one up, and I got to be a witness to it, and I'll leave it at that. So within the automotive industry, we assemble cars, right? We use a lot of powerful hand tools to put fasteners in place. And we were having a series of very, very serious hand injuries, amputations, serious lacerations relative to folks that were using these rotating tools, right, with high torque. So we worked our way through the process, right? So unfortunately, we sort of maybe did it a little backwards initially, but you got to learn from it, right? So we initially, we first looked at the gloves we were using. So Doug, you say, Mark, those people shouldn't be wearing gloves. We can say that all day, right? You're handling something that potentially has splinters, right? Metal splinters. You have something that might have machining oils on it. And people said, I don't want to directly be touching this stuff with my hand. I want a barrier, right? So we initially had people that were using, let's say, the polyurethane coated gloves, just like maybe a general utility glove. But of all the various coated gloves, this is the world according to Mark, this is a disclaimer, whatever. The PU gloves have really the most grippiness to them. So our first step was we need to eliminate PU gloves. Give ourselves a little pat on the back. That didn't do it because we went to nitrile gloves, maybe something that has less stickiness, right? But you can still do the job, still having hand injuries. So then we went into coated. We went to putting a covering over all of the shafts of all those tools. Very expensive undertakings to do it. A lot of grief because you got a lot of different tools and a lot of stuff. So we did it, and for the most part, again, we were getting better. It wasn't good enough. We were still having, unfortunately, some very, very traumatic hand injuries, whether it be that potentially they couldn't get one, they ran to the crib, they needed to run a tool to make production that day. So they would end up with a tool that wasn't in a sleeve, or they got their hand too low where the rotating part was. And a guy that I was working with named Regis Rusnak, Regis came to me and he said, "What do you think if we could develop a glove that had tearaway fingers?" And I said, "Regis, what are you smoking?"
Right.
Okay. He said, "No." He said, "Are you okay if I go work on this?" I said, "Yeah." He said, I think it's attainable." So Regis worked with our PPE vendor, Choctaw Call. I give them a lot of credit because they invested a lot of time and energy. They worked with a PPE supplier that I'm forgetting the name. They're in Ohio. If somebody wants it, we can sure track it down. I'm sure they're still around. And they went through a number of trials and tribulations. And they came up with a general utility glove that had some stitching around the fingers that if that tool got tangled around that glove, it just simply pulled the glove right off.
Nice.
Pulled the glove right off.
Nice.
We went to zero. Injuries, and amputations. We built capacity to fail safely. We built that in the event of error, in the event that I grabbed the tool wrong, in the event that I grabbed the tool that did not have that sleeve, in the event that I got my hand too close to that rotating shaft or that end that's rotating to put that fastener in place. And then what we do then is we went through and we identified all the jobs very clearly. Here's the jobs that required. So we knew that if you're wearing theirs, you have to go tearaway gloves. But then Regis, he upped his game. He came back and he said, "What do you think if we could build a cut resistant glove with tearaway?" I said, "All right, Regis, what are you doing now?" And sure enough, and I don't remember if it's a cut 2 or a cut 4, it doesn't matter. They went and then built a cut resistant glove that also has the tearaway features so you have the cut resistance part, but around it so that if somebody were to latch on, that it'll tear the fingers away. So I'm just honored because Todd actually made it the feature of one of his podcasts. We didn't do it for that reason. We did it for the right reasons, but we told Todd the story and he thought it was pretty cool. But
absolutely,
it's just I just think it's a classic story that when you engage the workers and you understand what they're facing every day, and understanding. We had some folks that said, "I can't believe you're letting these people wear gloves." These people are going to wear gloves, right? Because they don't want to go home with splinters in their fingers, right? Or they don't want machining oils. They don't want dermatitis on their fingers. But really involving them and letting them trial different things and getting their direct feedback and asking the right questions to understand what they needed. It's really a cool case story, and one that I'm really, really proud about. That we could go people, because these were very difficult traumatic injuries that are permanently disfiguring. And it doesn't matter, male, female. These are bad events and you can't let them happen. And that's something we're really proud about. And again, it was a partnership with our PPE suppliers, with our employees, with the union. We all worked together to able to go and do that. So I thought it was a pretty cool story. That's
a fantastic story. And it's really interesting because in most cases, people would either compel a certain behavior. They would just say, "No gloves. We've identified these gloves are a problem. You're not wearing gloves." And as you alluded to, the employees are going to wear gloves if they feel like they need gloves.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter that you put in a rule, and this whole control thing, we know doesn't necessarily work very well. And so I think it is always impressive when there's a little bit of reality thrown into this process. And as you said, utilizing the input from the employees to help drive this direction. I'm going to use gloves. I know that creates a certain amount of risk, but as you said, this is my preference. And so it's going to happen regardless of how many times you tell me not to use them or discipline someone. It's going to happen. So we need to find a solution. And that process in and of itself is just brilliant. That whole learning team, identification and correction process that is lacking in so many organizations that I work with, trying to convince them that this is useful, that this is a way to approach it. I have those gloves now they are being marketed and utilized outside of the automotive industry.
I sure hope so, because I think it's a great thing and something that
Yeah,
could
because
really benefit those
I know a lot of machinists that would like to wear gloves, but they're so afraid of gloves for that very reason. You know, the lathe operators and anybody that works on any turning shaft driven equipment, is probably wants gloves, but they're terrified of them, or they've been taught over the years you can't use them, or whatever. So that
Yeah.
seems like a solution that will have a lot of application.
So the one we're working on now, and I'm going to need a bit more time, is that we, as I mentioned, we make plastic bottles. We're making some of the larger extruded bottles, like a big, detergent bottles. They have something that come down called a mold knife, right? And it
Mhm.
closes off. And you touch a mold knife, it's instant laceration. So every time a bottle gets jammed, the employees might have to go in there and manually pull that bottle out. And the expectation is that every time you go in there, you put this mold knife cover on. So again, blue line, black line, and I think you know where this is going.
Yep.
So we're going to do a learning team event, right, with those operators to really try to understand that and what engineering controls can we do. In a classic example, I'm really stealing this thunder from the site manager who's really has just been come out, and he's really an advocate for this. He goes out to his guy and he said, what's a workaround? He said, I'll tell you the workaround. He said, you give me that 3-foot ratchet. I stand on the tippy top of my toes and I can ratchet it backwards 96 times. And I don't have to reach into that equipment and grab that bottle. He said, you really think I'm going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
So again, getting out to those folks that are doing the work and not just saying an absolute thou shall, but understand those constraints and what they have to do and how we then can build capacity for them. And
Right.
again, the context is driving behavior, right?
Absolutely.
And again, I've unfortunately investigated, I'll say 100 amputations in my career, if not more. And we've unfortunately, one of my colleagues was at a site. He called and he said, while he was there, right? And he said, Mark, we had an amputation. And I said, what was the equipment reliability today? And he asked me, he said, how did you know ask that question? I said, just in my little small world, high 90% of equipment reliability drives amputations, right? That, you have that equipment jam up and there's a problem and they're going in to make that one quick adjustment, whether they don't take the lockout or whatever they do, trying to be good workers, trying to do the right thing to keep the equipment up and running. They take that shortcut and boom, then something happens. And so, really, if we drove equipment reliability, and I love to have that dialogue with senior leaders and TPM folks, that's why I'm a huge advocate that safety, quality, TPM, all sort of that triangle to, support production, safe quality operations, that if we have that right, we can really, again, go after some of those, SIF prevention. Because again, even from, lockout, machine guarding, some of those, when you really peel the onion back, Doug, a lot of it is equipment reliability issued. You keep it running right, people won't have the temptation to not follow lockout, to reach in, to take those various shortcuts that can unfortunately lead, versus saying, bad employee. The difference between a best practice and an injury is outcome, right?
Right, exactly.
If an employee gets in there and does it right, you say, good work, you got a new best practice. Look what great stuff you did. You kept the line running. If they go in there and get hurt, you're a bad employee. You should be disciplined.
Right. You shouldn't have done that. Yeah, that's on you.
We got to take that mindset out.
That machine reliability thing is so interesting. And your comment about unjamming, the percentage of these amputations or injuries that are probably the result of something like that. We talk about that a lot. And troubleshooting, unjamming, those things that employees, maintenance guys, they perceive that, needs to be done while the equipment is energized oftentimes. And OSHA's perspective and, the traditional control compliance perspective has always been lock it out, unjam it, and then unlock it, start the machine up again. Those are in such tremendous conflict that we almost know that employees are going to unjam things or troubleshoot things while they are energized. It's how they do their work. And so we need to find ways to build capacity into that system so that they can do that without endangering themselves, or as you said, just work on the machine reliability so that we don't have to deal with that so often.
We take away the temptation. If it runs
Take
well,
away the temptation, but we are not going to change the fact that they are going to do that with the equipment energized. under most circumstances.
Yeah. And these are good employees.
Just the
You know,
reality.
yeah. Just a couple of the thoughts I had, because I realized I've rambled on a bit, is
No.
I wanted to quickly talk to you about certification, and just a quick, interesting story. So I did get certified in both hygiene and safety. I didn't do it because I wanted some initials. Is I did it for a different reason, and I love to tell this story. You know, getting cert, and I learned this on my certification journey. So I was getting ready for the CSP exam. So I had just taken the section to learn about radiation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I learned about this much about radiation, and I'm working for the insurance company, and I go to visit a job site, which was a nuclear power plant. And I said, hey, I just got some questions about, radiation. And they said, we'll put you with our physicist, right? Nuclear physicist, whatever they call those guys, right? Yeah, brilliant guy, right? And I said to this guy, I said, what's the average milli-rem exposure for your employees who work here? He said, what'd you just say? I said, man, did I not do that right? I said, what's the average milli-rem exposure? He said, you're the first safety guy that I've ever known that's even known what the hell a milli-rem is. Right. And I said, hey, I am no expert. I said, hey, and honestly, I'm just studying for a certification exam. I just learned about it, but I'm curious to learn. Doug, that guy took me under his wing. He spent 45 minutes and talked to me all about radiation safety and nuclear safety, right? So to me, certification is the liberal arts degree of safety. To me, it's not the initials. It's the journey that I took, the things that I had to learn. The fact that I had to learn ergonomics and radiation safety and some physics and all this other stuff, whether it be for CIH, CSP, whatever. I mean, let's face it. Is there credibility when you're in front of those regulators or those jurors? Maybe there is. I don't know. But to me, it gave me this depth and breadth that I could then talk to people about safety, right? The reason I went back to school, right? I went back and got an MBA is that I had a big budget. I was in this position with this huge budget. I had to go talk to finance people. I didn't know nothing about finance. Mm-hmm. I went and took a finance class. I took an accounting class. Then I realized I'd take 10 more to get an MBA. But the fact that I could then speak the language of the constituents that I had I got to work with, I took an organizational behavior class. Probably the best thing I ever took to learn about how people work and how power works in an organization and thought leaders. Again, the more that I think we can grow and develop ourselves as safety professionals, get out of our paradigm. Again, we can get really geeky in safety, and we love being in our geeky world, right? But if we want to be effective and we want to then become, we have to put the S off our chest and the F on those people on the floor. And that's about getting on the floor and speaking their language and knowing their operations and rolling up our sleeves and getting with them. I just think that's critically important. And what we can do to further our skill set of continually learning and growing makes us better safety professionals and more effective, because there will never be enough safety professionals in any company. There never are. But more that we can impart and empower and teach and learn and get on the floor and then learn where those constraints are, that's how you have an effective safety program. But one thing I got to brag about with my present employer, we have an incredible near-miss, incredible reporting system. And this is one that is really a pride point, is that amongst our 3,700 employees, we get, you ready for this, nearly 30,000 safety engagements a year, right? That means about 15,000 near misses, about 15,000 proactive safety conversations where we go out and talk to the employees. We expect peer-to-peer interaction. Now, do we incentivize? We do. Our expectation is once a quarter, but it's really a cornerstone and a hallmark that from an engagement standpoint, I think it's perfect. Really when I look at a safety program, I look at it a bit like a suspension bridge. I like sort of the high risk stuff, what I might call that severity side. Mm-hmm. The other one is sort of that frequency side, whether it be the ergonomics, the minor stuff. But that bridge deck is the culture, and to me, the fundamental of that is that engagement. We know you need the leadership commitment. If you don't have that, you got nothing, right? But the next phase beyond that is getting those workers engaged and getting it onto the floor. And it's something that I'm really, really proud of. They've been doing it before I got here. So I have to give this company credit, but really putting the focus and attention and letting that be the metric, not the output, not the outcome metric, but the proactive metric of engagement. I really think that helps to drive, safety programs where we need to go as safety professionals. Because again, there's never enough of us to go around.
That's right. That's fantastic. And that is going to be our next episode. So after you've listened to Bob and heard the new comments about efficiency and thoroughness and those kind of things, you're going to have to come back and talk about that piece, because that engagement piece is so critical. I'm with you 100% that, and to get 30,000 safety engagement activities out of your workforce. I think everybody has that question. How do I get employee engagement? How do I get them to talk about near misses? How do I get them to report anything, findings, observations? I think the mechanics of how you guys do that would be really interesting to everyone. So hopefully we can do that. We'll set some date 2 or 3 months from now. We are going to be, I can tell we're going to be fast friends. I'm going to be out on that pontoon boat next summer, it sounds like, and we're going to be, I don't know if you actually like imbibe or.
It might happen. It might happen. Yeah.
But I would love to, one thing that I am a proponent of is just this continuous learning, intellectual curiosity. I was just looking at in an organizational psychology program, because I was looking, okay, what am I going to do next? And so I was doing research on online programming for organizational psychology. I think that's really interesting. I've been reading and listening a lot to these guys, the Safety 2 guys, because that is fascinating. Our friends over at MakUSafe and some of the technological advances that are going to be taking shape here in the near future that exist already. But I was talking to someone this morning when I was sitting in the car driving over here about some of the things that MakUSafe has the capacity to add to their data-driven decision-making. It is a great time to be in this profession. It's fascinating.
It is, and then you throw in the facts of like psychological safety and that effect on trust, and then how that leads to engagement. Again, we can get really geeky on that stuff. I love to do it.
I love it.
Okay, cool.
I love it. And the certification thing, thank you for sharing that piece too, because I went through my certification 2004, 2005, back when John Henshaw was the assistant secretary for OSHA. And he really felt strongly that was important, that it spoke to the credibility of the agency, the education of the people that were within the agency. And so he was willing to put his money where his mouth was and commit, resources to that. And so I thought this is an incredible time to avail myself of that generosity. So, and like you, I didn't understand radiation at all, man. I mean, there was so many. As you went through those preparation courses and the study, you were realizing my world is so small and limited. What I do as a safety professional is just one small slice of the entirety of this profession. There are just so many interesting directions to go. And when I talk to people like you that have had other experiences, different experiences than I've had, it always fascinates me. So we have a lot more to talk about. We have run up on our hour. And so it just goes by in a flash, but we're going to have to do this again.
Okay.
Tell Bob I said hello. He won't know who the hell I am, but tell him I'm a believer. Okay. And we're out there, whatever those guys are doing is making an impact. So to keep doing it. And I'm going to be in touch probably this afternoon, and we'll schedule another session within a few months. Maybe we'll do this quarterly if you have the stomach for it.
Love it. Fun stuff. Yeah. Hey, last thing I just want to add, and I told the story I told Doug before this, is that I had a really tough week with my mother. She got influenza with subsequent pneumonia, right? But she had a flu shot 10 days beforehand. They had to call in the crash carts 3 times, but mom's alive. She's going to do well. She's going to recover. But her flu shot is what saved her. So I'm an advocate. I'm a believer. Please get a flu shot. Do it for you and your loved ones. Please.
I get a flu shot every year, man. I just like needles, frankly. Yeah. So, there is a little bit more to it for me than that, but I'm a believer. I got a flu shot, and I'm totally in agreement. I'm glad your mother is doing better.
Thank you.
Hope she has a full recovery and does well. And that's a great message to end on, man. Mark, I'm really glad we had an opportunity to meet over at MakUSafe a month ago. And thank you for everything you shared. Thank you for what you're doing. You are an incredible advocate of this profession. And I hope you have a great evening. It sounds like you guys are having fun tonight.
Yeah. So, and the last thing I got to say, I got to give kudos. So a guy that I work with named Mike White, he listens to you. You are one of his professors, and he heard
Southern.
Yeah, and he said, He says, if you get it, he says, I would so much like to meet Doug Fletcher. He's the best professor I had at school. So that's the reason I went up to you. I said, hey, one of your students says hello. And that's how we started the conversation, right? So a small world. So
well, I hope I gave
thank you to Mike for setting up the introduction.
Nice. That's fantastic. I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed it. I only spent a few years with Columbia Southern, but I enjoyed it very much. And I like this. I got to meet a lot of really incredible people. I mean, I had students that were over in Afghanistan at the time. They would be doing their homework in a foxhole, taking, I got an email from one student saying, we took a bunch of incoming rounds last night, so I didn't get my homework done. I was like, you're okay, man.
You're entitled.
Get it to me when you can. So, Mark, Have a great weekend. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you.
I look forward to speaking with you again. And thank you for all you're doing. Guys, gals, those of you that are out there in the profession doing this, that are true believers, we're with you. We're going to get you as much information and resources as we can to help you along your journey. And again, thank you to all our veterans, serving now, having served in the past. We appreciate you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.